I discovered my husband's secret on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, standing in our sunroom with a basket of laundry pressed against my hip. He didn't know I was home. I'd left work early because of a migraine that had been building behind my eyes since morning, the kind that makes every sound feel like it's happening inside your skull. I was 63 years old, married for 37 years, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about Graham Mitchell. I was wrong. His voice drifted through the house from his office, louder than usual. He must have had the door open, confident in his solitude. At first, I didn't pay attention. Graham had therapy sessions every Thursday at 2, but apparently Dr. Chen had rescheduled. I heard the tinny quality of speakerphone, then Graham's voice, clear and measured in a way I recognized. It was his honest voice, the one he used when he was trying to get to the root of something difficult. "I don't know when it stopped," he was saying. "Maybe it never really started the way it should have, but somewhere around year 8 or 9, I realized I was going through the motions. I stopped moving. The laundry basket suddenly felt impossibly heavy." Dr. Chen's voice responded, muffled but audible. "Going through the motions in what sense, Graham?" "In every sense." There was a long pause. The affection, the interest, the intimacy, all of it. "I perform it because that's what a husband does. That's what she expects. But if I'm being completely honest with you and with myself, I haven't felt genuinely attracted to Diane in decades. Maybe ever, if I really examine it." The basket slipped from my hands. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud, and I froze, waiting to see if he'd heard. But he kept talking, and I stood there in my own sunroom, in the house we'd bought in 1994, listening to my husband dismantle our entire marriage with the calm efficiency of someone discussing a failed business venture. "She's a good woman," Graham continued. "Exceptional, really. Brilliant in her field. The boys adore her. She handled everything when Mom was dying, everything when we relocated to Ottawa for my position. She never complains, never asks for more than I give. And maybe that's part of the problem. It's so easy to just exist next to her. She doesn't demand passion. She doesn't notice I'm not giving it. Have you considered that she might notice more than you think?" Dr. Chen asked. Graham laughed, a short, bitter sound I'd never heard from him before. "Diane? No. She's too focused on her work, her research. She got that senior lectureship at Carleton last year, remember? That's consumed her attention. I think she's actually happier when I'm less present. Gives her more time for her papers." I thought about the lectureship, how I'd worked 18-hour days for 6 months to prove I deserved it, how Graham had kissed my forehead when I got the offer and said he was proud. How he'd seemed distant at my celebration dinner, checking his phone, leaving early because he had an early meeting. Had he already been feeling this way then? Had he felt it when I was 40, 50, 60? Had our entire life been a performance? "I stay because leaving would be complicated," Graham said. "We're financially intertwined. Our social circle would fracture. The boys would be devastated, even though they're grown. And honestly, what would I even be looking for at 65? Another relationship? No, this is fine. It's comfortable. Diane is a reliable partner. She keeps the house running beautifully. She's an excellent cook. We have good conversations about politics and books. If I'm not in love with her, well, maybe that's just what marriage becomes after this long." "But you feel you're being dishonest," Dr. Chen said gently. "Every single day," Graham replied. "Every time she reaches for my hand and I take it but feel nothing. Every time she says I love you and I respond automatically. Every anniversary, every birthday, every time we make love and I'm just absent. Yes, I'm being dishonest. But what's the alternative? Blow up 3.5 decades because I don't feel butterflies anymore? That seems cruel. To both of us." I realized I was crying, silent tears dripping off my chin. I wiped them away with shaking hands and moved backward, toward the hallway, trying to calculate how quickly I could get to the bedroom without being heard. I needed to think. I needed to process what I'd just learned. I needed to. My hip bumped the console table. The vase of dried eucalyptus rattled. Graham's voice cut off mid-sentence. Footsteps. Quick. Purposeful. He appeared in the doorway of his office. phone still in hand, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and then a terrible dawning realization as he looked at my face. "Diane," he said, "I didn't know you were home." "Obviously," I managed. My voice sounded strange, distant. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." The phone in his hand buzzed. Dr. Chen's voice tinny and concerned. "Graham, is everything all right?" Graham lifted the phone. "I need to call you back." He ended the session without waiting for a response. We stood there, 10 feet apart, in the hallway of our beautiful home in New Edinburgh. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn. A dog barked. Normal sounds, a normal autumn day. Except nothing was normal anymore, and maybe it never had been. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you felt this way?" Graham's shoulders sagged. He looked old suddenly, older than 65, older than I'd ever seen him. "Diane, you have to understand." "How?" "Long. I don't know. 20 years? 25? It's not something that happened overnight. 25 years. Our sons had been teenagers. I'd been in my late 30s, just starting to make a name for myself in developmental psychology. We'd taken that trip to Nova Scotia for our anniversary. Made love in a bed and breakfast overlooking the Bay of Fundy. He'd held me afterward and told me I was beautiful. Had he been lying then? Had he been lying every time? "You said you haven't felt attracted to me in decades," I said. "Maybe ever." Graham closed his eyes. "You weren't supposed to hear that, but it's true." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. 37 years, I whispered. "We've been married for 37 years, Graham. We have 2 grown sons. We have a grandchild on the way. And you're telling me that for more than half of our marriage, you've been pretending?" "Not pretending," he said quickly. "I care about you deeply. I respect you enormously. You're my partner, my friend. But you don't love me." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I don't know what love is supposed to feel like at our age," Graham finally said. "Maybe this is it. Comfort, companionship, shared history. That's not love," I said. "That's settling. We're in our 60s, Diane. Everyone settles." Something hardened in my chest. A lifetime of accommodating, of understanding, of being the reasonable one. It crystallized into something sharp and cold. "Get out," I said. Graham blinked. "What?" "Get out of this house, now. Take whatever you need for a few days. Go to your brother's, go to a hotel, I don't care, but I can't look at you right now. Diane, let's talk about this. Let's be rational." "Rational?" The word came out louder than I intended. "You want me to be rational? You've been lying to me for 25 years, and you want me to be rational about it? Get out." To his credit, he didn't argue further. He went to our bedroom, where I'd slept next to him for nearly 4 decades, and packed a bag. I stood in the hallway and watched him move through the motions, this man I thought I knew, this stranger wearing my husband's face. At the door, he turned back. "I never meant to hurt you." "That somehow makes it worse," I said, and closed the door in his face. The house was silent after he left. I walked through each room, seeing it differently now. The kitchen, where I'd made thousands of meals, the living room where we'd hosted dinner parties, the office where I'd written papers late into the night while Graham slept. Or had he been sleeping? Had he been lying awake, regretting his choices, trapped by his own cowardice? I found myself back in the sunroom, staring at the laundry basket still on the floor, clothes spilling out, his shirts, my cardigans, all mixed together like our lives had been, except our lives hadn't been mixed. I'd been building something real while he'd been going through the motions. The worst part was looking back and seeing all the signs I'd missed. Or maybe not missed, maybe I'd seen them and chosen not to understand what they meant. The way he'd stopped initiating affection around the time Colin went to university. I'd thought he was just getting older, less driven by physical need. The way our conversations had become pleasant but shallow, sticking to safe topics. I'd thought we were just comfortable with each other. The way he never seemed to have opinions about our vacation destinations, our social plans, even our anniversary celebrations. I'd thought he was being considerate, letting me choose. But maybe he just hadn't cared enough to have preferences. I'd been so focused on my career, my research, my students. Had I been neglecting him? Was that why he'd checked out emotionally? Or had he checked out first, and I'd simply filled the space he'd left with work because there was nothing else to fill it with? These questions consumed me for days. I called in sick to the university, something I almost never did. I ignored calls from friends. I told the boys I had a flu and couldn't see them. I needed time to think, to understand, to figure out what came next. Graham texted on the third day. "Can we talk? Please?" I didn't respond. On the fifth day, he called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was careful, measured. "Diane, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But we need to discuss how to move forward. We're adults. We can work through this. Work through this." As if this was a conflict over finances or household duties. As if he hadn't just revealed that our entire marriage was a facade. I deleted the message. It took me 2 weeks to reach clarity. 2 weeks of crying, of anger, of bargaining with myself. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he was having a crisis. Maybe I could be enough if I just tried harder, dressed better, was more attentive. But then I'd remember his words. I perform it because that's what a husband does. And I'd know that I deserved more than a performance. Even at 63. Especially at 63. I called my lawyer on a Monday morning. Her name was Patricia Nguyen, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd handled a colleague's divorce the year before. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in a leather portfolio. "You've been married 37 years, she said when I finished. "That means significant asset division. Does he know you're considering divorce?" "He knows he's not welcome in our home," I said. "I think he can connect the dots." Patricia smiled grimly. "Men are often surprisingly bad at connecting dots. I'll draft a letter of intent. We'll need to catalog all shared assets, retirement accounts, the house. Do you want to pursue this formally?" I thought about my research, about the studies I'd conducted on relationship satisfaction and aging, about the data that showed people in unfulfilling marriages experienced higher rates of depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, about how I'd spent my career helping others understand their emotional needs while completely ignoring my own. "Yes," I said, "I want a divorce." The word felt strange in my mouth, foreign, but also necessary. Graham contested nothing. When Patricia's letter arrived, he called immediately, his voice strained but accepting. "If this is what you want, I won't fight you on it." "It's not what I want," I told him. "What I wanted was a husband who actually loved me. What I have is a husband who stayed for convenience. So yes, this is what I'm choosing." The divorce process was remarkably efficient when both parties cooperate. We divided our assets 50-50. He kept his pension, I kept mine. We sold the house in New Edinburgh. Neither of us could bear to live there alone, haunted by the ghost of our fake marriage. I used my portion to buy a small townhouse in the Glebe, close to campus, with a garden I could tend myself. The boys took it hard. Colin, our eldest, couldn't understand why we couldn't just work it out. "People go through rough patches," he kept saying. "You've been together forever. You can fix this." But how do you fix 3 decades of pretending? How do you fix a foundation that was never solid to begin with? Our younger son, Marcus, was quieter about it. He came to visit me in my new place, helped me hang curtains, and finally said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I know this wasn't what you planned for this stage of your life." "No," I agreed. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe plans change." Point 4. The first year was the hardest. I had to relearn how to be alone, really alone, for the first time since my mid-20s. I had to untangle which parts of my identity were mine and which parts I'd built around being Graham's wife. I had to make new routines, new traditions, new meanings. But slowly, something shifted. I started accepting social invitations I would have declined before, thinking Graham wouldn't enjoy them. I traveled to conferences and stayed extra days to explore cities on my own. I took a ceramics class at the community center and discovered I had a talent for throwing bowls. I let my hair grow longer than I'd worn it in years, stopped dyeing the gray, and found I liked how I looked distinguished, my colleague said, authentic. I started noticing things I'd stopped noticing during my marriage, the way morning light came through my bedroom window, the pleasure of cooking a meal exactly to my taste without considering anyone else's preferences, the freedom to read until 2 in the morning or go to bed at 8 without explanation or apology. I wasn't lonely, I realized. I was alone. There's a difference. Graham tried to reconcile 3 months after the divorce was finalized. He showed up at my office at Carlton, looking sheepish, holding flowers. "I made a mistake," he said. "I've been seeing Dr. Chen more frequently, and I've realized I took you for granted. What we had was special. I want to try again." I looked at him. This man I'd spent most of my adult life loving, and felt nothing but a mild, distant pity. "What we had wasn't special, Graham," I said gently. "It was one-sided. I loved you. You tolerated me. That's not a marriage. That's not even a friendship. I can change." "Maybe you can. But you'd be changing for the wrong reasons. You're lonely. You miss the convenience of having someone manage your life. That's not the same as missing me." He tried 4 more times over the next 6 months. Phone calls, letters, showing up at university events. Each time, I was kind but firm. No. By the time I turned 65, I'd stopped counting his attempts to reconnect. They'd tapered off, and I'd heard through mutual friends that he was seeing someone, a widow from his golf club. I felt nothing about this news except hope that he'd be honest with her in ways he'd never been honest with me. My own life had taken on new dimensions. I'd been promoted to full professor, published a book on attachment theory in later life, and started mentoring graduate students who reminded me why I'd fallen in love with psychology in the first place. I traveled to Iceland with a group of women from my ceramics class. I learned to kayak. I adopted a rescue dog named Fitzgerald, who slept at the foot of my bed and loved me with an uncomplicated devotion I'd forgotten was possible. On the anniversary of the day I'd overheard Graham's therapy session 3 years later, I hosted a dinner party at my townhouse. My colleagues, my sons and their partners, some neighbors I'd become close with. We ate well, drank wine, laughed until my sides hurt. Colin's wife, Jenna, was 8 months pregnant with our first grandchild, and watching her glow with anticipation made me feel like I was seeing the future unfold in real time. After everyone left, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago. The one who'd measured her worth by how well she served others, how little she demanded, how easily she accommodated. The one who'd believed that being understanding meant accepting less than she deserved. I didn't blame her. She'd been taught that self-sacrifice was noble, that a good wife made herself small to make room for her husband, but I also knew I could never be her again. The lesson I learned, the one I now share with my students, my sons, anyone who'll listen, is this: you cannot build a genuine life on a foundation of someone else's performance. Love, real love, requires presence. It requires showing up authentically, even when it's messy, even when it's difficult, even when it means risking rejection. Graham had chosen safety over authenticity, and in doing so, he'd robbed both of us of the chance at something real. Maybe with someone else, in some other life, he could have felt the passion he'd never felt with me. Maybe I could have found someone who loved me not despite my intensity, but because of it. We'll never know, because we spent decades pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I think about younger people now, people starting their relationships, and I want to tell them, don't settle for someone who tolerates you. Don't accept performance when you deserve presence. Don't wait until you're 63 and accidentally overhear the truth. Ask the hard questions early. Demand honesty, even when it hurts. Because living with the truth, even a painful truth, is always better than building a life on a comfortable lie. And if you find yourself in a relationship that's died somewhere along the way, have the courage to admit it. Not just to your therapist on speakerphone when you think no one's listening, but to yourself. To your partner, have the difficult conversation. Face the pain head on. Because staying in a hollow marriage doesn't protect anyone. It just postpones the inevitable, while stealing years you could have spent building something genuine, either alone or with someone else. I'm 66 now. My life looks nothing like I thought it would at this age. I'm single, living alone in a townhouse instead of the family home I'd imagined growing old in. But I'm also more myself than I've been in decades. I laugh more easily. I try new things without second-guessing myself. I've learned that it's never too late to choose authenticity over comfort, truth over performance, yourself over the version of yourself you think you're supposed to be. Last week, I was having coffee with a former student who's going through a rough patch in her marriage. She asked me if I regretted the divorce, if I wished I'd tried harder to make it work with Graham. I thought about it for a long moment, really thought about it, before answering. I regret that it took me so long to hear what he was really saying, I told her. I regret the years I spent performing the role of happy wife when I could have been building a life that was genuinely mine. But the divorce itself? No. That was the first fully honest choice I'd made in decades, and it led to this life, which is smaller in some ways but infinitely larger in the ways that matter. So no, I don't regret it. I regret the lie, but I'm grateful for the truth, even though it hurt. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and I knew she understood. That's the thing about truth. It might shatter your world. It might force you to rebuild everything from the ground up, but at least you're building on solid ground this time. At least you know it's real. And real, I've learned, is always better than perfect.